This is Talk Over Tea,
a place for a casual conversation about life in local government.
with Kassandra
and Claudel Frederic.
elected officials from the city of Amesbury, Massachusetts.
Relax with us for a moment. The tea is hot.
Welcome to Talk Over Tea. We are here for another episode, and it's not just Claudel and I. We have a guest. We have Noah from MeVa, our regional transit authority, and I'm going to let him tell you about MeVa and who they are and what they do. So thanks again for joining us, and always a reminder to share, like, and follow, and all of those other great things so that your friends can hear what we're talking about here as well. And we're gonna have a great conversation today. So Noah, welcome to Talk Over Tea.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, very happy to have you here. So jump right in and tell us what MeVa is and what you do.
Sure. So MeVa is one of 15 regional transit authorities in Massachusetts that serve. I mean, I think we get less attention than the MBTA. That's the big behemoth.
Mm-hmm.
But there are actually 15 of us that serve whether the gateway communities that we do or other more rural or smaller cities. We serve. We're about the third largest of the 15, so outside of Springfield and Worcester.
Okay.
And we serve the 16 cities in the greater Merrimack Valley,
Mm-hmm.
and 6 cities and towns. And the center of gravity is along the Merrimack River. The gateway cities of Lawrence, Methuen, and Haverhill.
Yeah.
But we come out here to Amesbury and Newburyport and Salisbury as well.
That's great.
That is perfect, actually. So MeVa is famously free. What led to that decision?
We are famously free, and I think we this is an area we help blaze a trail. I think back now 3 years ago, well, before 3 years ago, and the board voted to do a 2-year pilot, which started March of 2022. And I think there were still a lot of naysayers. There was still a lot of speculation as whether it made sense, whether it didn't, whether there are unintended consequences. Mm-hmm. And the board also said it was on us as the staff to get the data and show whether it works. I think as we rolled the program out, it became very clear how successful it was, to the point that the Massachusetts legislature put money in the last 2 budgets to make all RTAs, if they wanted to go fare free. So that allowed us to extend the initial 2-year program to 3 years. And at the same time, we worked with our local planning commission, the MVPC. They conducted a business case analysis. They retained the firm Stantec that looked at looking at everything, what is the costs and benefits of being fare free. And I think that blew people away, including myself, including members of my team who live it day in and day out. But just some of it is just, what are the costs of collecting fares for MeVa, and that's things you may not think of. But we used to send 2 managers to the money room to count the cash, and that's the reason why they're 2 there. Long before any of us were there were some irregularities. So you have to just make sure that you had eyes on the people counting, but it's also, it's a labor-intensive job. Money is gross, and it's not the highest and best use of people's time.
Yeah.
You have to vault the money. You have to hire a armored car to pick it up, and armored cars have to be unpredictable. So they can't say, I'm going to be there Tuesday at 2:00 every week, because then you get a Brinks job, right?
Yeah.
People predict it. So they say, we'll be there in 5 minutes. You got to drop everything. As fare collection technology gets more and more high tech, it gets more and more finicky. So we'd have to send road supervisors out. So all that together, that was 3 FTEs. And we're not a big operation. But it's also other benefits beyond just us. So to the community, I mean, one thing that really stood out for me is they looked at ridership increases, and at medical facilities and the hospitals and clinics, ridership grew even faster than it did in the rest of our system. So that means people going to doctor's appointments they otherwise wouldn't have gone to. And that has a cost. It's hard to quantify that, but people being sick has a cost. People dying, that has a cost.
Yeah.
And so, things like absenteeism in schools, the schools had more, even more increased ridership than the rest of our system. So that, that really stood out. And then our board, under the leadership of our inspired chair, so full disclosure, the mayor of Amesbury is our chair. But they voted unanimously to go permanently fare free. So we were the first transit authority to do that as a permanent policy, which is, we got lots of calls from riders who knew it was a 2-year pilot and said, "Oh God, you're going to start collecting fares again. I don't know what I'm going to do." There's it built that anxiety. So that right off the table just took that anxiety off from our riders, and that was real.
Cheers to the chair.
Yeah, very much so.
I really don't do any of the hard work. So Noah and his team do. So tell us about that team. Actually, how many people work at MeVa and make up the full team of our bus drivers and others?
Yeah, and
mechanics and all that. And
as you and probably only a handful of people know, it's kind of it's a lot of inside baseball that we are a public entity. We actually just celebrated our 50th anniversary along with the original 10 of the RTAs. But so the RTA staff itself is 7 people. And then we contract out for the operation of our service. That's in the legislation. We have to do that. But we work together. Our offices are in the administrative maintenance facility. We just actually a big milestone. We hired our 100th bus driver.
Nice.
Which is, you need the men and women behind the wheel to operate the service. So, you need the equipment and you need the operators. When I started about not quite 4 years ago, we were at 74. So that was an effort to really increase the personnel who are actually putting the service on the road. And that's, I think another great thing about public transportation is these are good jobs that are drawn from the community. You can't outsource driving a bus overseas, right? That's got to be done by folks in the community, and that's, it's old school, good, reliable work with great benefits, and that's another benefit to our community as well.
Yeah, and tell us about the types of service that you provide. So those 100 drivers, what are they doing? What types of equipment are they driving? What types of service are they providing? Who are we reaching in this region that really benefits from MeVa?
Yeah, and that's and thank you for putting it that way, because I underrepresented what that's just for the big buses.
So there's even more.
So there's another 32 drivers who are driving the smaller minibuses or vans that are geared towards seniors and people with disabilities, and those are our 2 business lines. So we have the fixed route buses. Those are the numbered. So here in Amesbury, it's the number 17, which goes between Haverhill and Salisbury Beach, with the intermediate stop here at the Costello Center, and then you have the 19, which connects from Newburyport to the Costello Center here in Amesbury as well. But it ties into a full network, and that's how public transportation works best. Is if we figured out every possible trip that everyone is going to make, then we're not pushing the envelope, right? Because it's the community knows how to make it work if we just put something that allows them to do that. The other service, the mini MeVa, comes out of our requirements under the ADA, or the Americans with Disabilities Act. Which requires that anytime you have a fixed route, which is what the big buses are, you have to have a paratransit service that for people who can't use the fixed route. It has to be within 3/4 of a mile, the fixed route. We go above and beyond that. And it has to be anyone who's ADA eligible, which is, certain disabilities. I think we've tried to make that as easy as possible to navigate. So, it doesn't have to be a doctor that signs off. It can be any medical or mental health practitioner of a pretty, we're pretty loose with that. And you have to reserve it a day in advance. So there's, some constraints there, but it's a great service. And I think what we've been working hard to do is, it used to be that it was kind of very siloed. So you were either consider yourself a mini MeVa rider or a regular MeVa rider. And we said, okay, first of all, when we rebranded, so again, following the city of Amesbury, but we made a point to have the look of the mini MeVa vans be the same as the fixed route buses. So folks can say, maybe when I go out shopping, I can take the bus, but if I know I'm going to come back with bags, I'll make sure there's a van waiting for me to take me back. Or, there might be types of trips trips during certain times of day that you feel more comfortable with the van, but other times you want the independence of just being able to hop on a bus.
Do you guys have an app?
Funny question. It's not a funny question if the answer is, we don't exactly have an app. We have a website. There is an app that basically takes all our open source data and tells you where the bus is.
Okay.
In theory. And we get calls all the time or emails all the time say your app is wrong.
Oh, okay.
And we say, no, thank you for telling us. We don't control that. So we'll reach out. It's the transit app. So we actually, and I preface it by saying funny question, because I recently reached out to someone I know who works there about maybe formalizing that relationship a little better. Unfortunately, that means paying them, but they have a basically the standard service, which is anyone can get, just tells you like just the buses right where you are. And it used to be you could fudge that a little by on your phone map, you move where you were and it gave you the information. They figured that out. They're smart folks there. So they created this sort of transit royale. They're based in Montreal. So it's there's, I think it might be from the Pulp Fiction. You remember that the Royale with cheese. That was a whole big thing between the. Our folks in the Merrimack Valley are either impoverished or cheap or both.
Yeah.
So nobody pays for the Transit Royale. So we would like to make that something more that we have a little more control over.
I use the free one.
Yeah, right.
So tell us how people take the bus. So I love that you have both options. The mini MeVa is more of a reservation type system, but I think people are intimidated by the bus in general. And I know you're working really hard on that. So how, and it's great that it's free, but how do I actually get on and off the bus? What is that like?
Right. No, and that's also, and I know that's a setup question because it's something we're working to change. We're on a transition that, like a lot of transit authorities our size, we're mostly a flag stop system. And that means that anywhere along the route, you wave the bus down, get the driver's attention, and they stop and you get on. There are some riders who live and die by this. They're particularly in Lawrence, there's some older women who just do this, and the bus driver knows that means stop the bus here. The problem is, and I think as you hinted at, that it can be awfully intimidating, particularly if you don't know the service.
Yeah.
If you don't know where the bus is going, where, how late it's going to go there, things like that. So what we have a plan, and it's not just a plan because we actually have the signage, but it's, we're putting signs up, which it's two pieces. One is what we call a lollipop, but it's just a circle with a bus icon in our MeVa colors. And then we have a flag, not to be confused with the flag stop, but the flag kind of comes out of the pole and it says, this is the 17 bus towards Salisbury Beach. And we'll have that information. So it's not a leap of faith to get the bus. We've been putting some stops up on an ad hoc basis, which is sometimes you have to do things kind of be reactionary when there are needs for either there's concerns or there's just a very clear need for a stop somewhere. But overall, you want to have a system. You want it to make sense. You want it to be consistent. So we've engaged the consulting firm AECOM, they're putting together, going to cite most of our stops and then have a plan for implementation, in the interim, we're just doing the ad hoc thing. So the very long answer to the question is you wave the bus down, you get on, don't worry about, you maybe say hi to the driver, but you don't have to, but you don't have to pay. And nobody asks you where you're going. Nobody checks anything. The great thing about public transportation, it's ain't nobody's business but your own why you're using it.
Love that.
And that's something that's very important to everyone who works at MeVa.
I love the fact that you guys are providing like a way for people to have less excuses. Like,
Yeah.
you know
Right.
what I mean?
No,
like,
Yeah.
it's huge. People
there
get
is
to
a
the
way to get
doctor's
there.
appointment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Getting to school.
Right. So I have to ask this question to sort of just bring that to a close. How do you get off if you're on this loop and you're like, well, I don't really want to go all the way to Stop and Shop.
Yeah.
I wanted to go to my friend's house, or I just wanted to get far enough that I could walk the rest of the way home. How do I get how do I get them to stop?
So we right on the buses, there's these little yellow strips, and you press those and it'll actually say stop requested up at the front of the bus, and the driver knows to stop at the next safe place to stop.
Okay.
So that's super easy. I think what's interesting is we try to introduce the service to people who may have had a different perception of what public transportation is. And that's one of the things that people remark on is like, oh, I didn't know you had that. That's how you get off. But it's important to know how to get off too. You don't want to get onto something you don't know how to get out of.
Yeah.
So
Right. And what are I've learned a few of these, but what are your limitations of where you can stop? So you can't just, I could hit that button, but you said the next safe place to stop. So what are some of those limitations for people to know about?
Right. And that's also the challenge, because one of the many reasons why it makes sense to go to actually having fixed stops is that, a great thing about our service is it's driven by human beings, not robots. But the downside to that is, if we're driven by robots, if that, in a world where that wasn't some dystopian sort of universe, but but then presumably each robot would have the same exact know where to stop in each place. But human beings have different discretion. And so, someone might say, that's my friend Claudel. I know, I'll let him on here, even though this isn't a stop. So not the drivers don't always agree. And then, if, so Claudel's used to me driving, and I let him on, and then you're driving the next day. And he says, wow,
I drove
Noah's
right
driving.
by.
And that's, so we want to minimize that, to anything like that. So generally anywhere where you're on bridges, for instance, it's not safe to stop. There are certain areas where if the bus stops, it will get rear-ended. So we've tried to downplay that, because I think, when I first started, we had maps with all this red for the no stop zone, which is not welcoming. And our goal is to be welcoming. Our goal is to establish MeVa as something that people feel that they're included, feel that they're welcome, that it's a place they want to be. And
I haven't ridden a bus. I need to.
Right, that is a tremendous oversight.
Tremendous oversight.
Right.
I love that. Yeah, you got to get on the bus. So downtown Amesbury is a no-stop zone. And that's because, like you said, sort of traffic-wise, there's not a lot of options there, a lot of great spots to stop. So the outskirts, like, right at the corner of School and Friend Street and Main Street, sort of not School and Friend, School and Main, as you get in towards the library, that's a stop that lots of people gather at. And then on the other end, so I guess, School and Friend, Friend and Pond-ish, we actually have a bus shelter there. So that is a very clear place to stop and get the bus. So that's great. And we just had a board meeting this week. We were talking about construction zones. And so it's something for people to keep in mind when we're doing road construction, that, we are perhaps impacting people's commutes and the bus is there. So I was going to ask about ridership, but do you have a question you want to jump in with?
Go ahead.
So we talked about how it's free, and there's people taking the bus who maybe wouldn't otherwise. And your center of gravity being those gateway cities. So in a place like Amesbury, we really want to get more people riding the bus. And we have a lot of people who say, oh, I saw the bus go by and I see it all the time, but it's empty. So can you talk about ridership and how we get more people riding the bus?
Yeah, no, and I think there's a lot in that. First of all, our ridership is fantastic.
Yes,
and
it
I think
is.
I was here on a call with a group in Tennessee who are trying to advocate for more service down there. And, we happen to bring up, we're now 60% above our pre-pandemic ridership numbers. And these are transit folks. So their response was, wow. And I said, I love talking to transit people because they know that that's so far an outlier in this industry. But
it's amazing.
And you're now a transit person. So you know,
I don't know if I
you
can,
know that. Yeah.
Yeah. Where's the title? Yeah.
You are the person. And Claude, I don't know, she was the keynote speaker at the MARTA, which is all the RTAs, that's our association, the legislative luncheon for the all the reps and senators, but we had the Secretary of Transportation. I was not at this elite table, but the mayor was, and the Secretary of Transportation was sitting there just going, yes, everything, and it was there are I mean, obviously Amesbury is better than any other municipality in the state.
We're ringing bells. We're ringing bells.
Right, but it shares a lot of the same challenges that so many of the municipalities around the Commonwealth experience. And so, from the local perspective that the mayor was able to present really resonated with all the folks in the room, and hopefully that resonance also leads to more funding. But
we'll talk about that.
We'll talk about, but in terms of ridership, I mean, we're 60% above our pre-pandemic levels, and that really stands out when you hear so many transit authorities saying, "If only I could get back to where I was before the pandemic." And I think some of that is us being fare free. Obviously, that's a part. But for any scientists who are watching this. It was not a controlled experiment. And at the same time we did we went fare free, we also increased frequency. All of our Lawrence-based services, we doubled the frequency. We improved frequencies in a few of our other routes, added routes. We reconfigured all the routes in all the Seacoast communities. So it used to be, there was just basically one route that went from Haverhill to Amesbury, then did this sightseeing tour through Newburyport, then went back, recrossed the bridge and went to Salt. So for if you weren't really going to one of the sites on the sightseeing tour in Newburyport, it was a real long trip. And so this way it kind of makes it so you can match better, and one of the things that's important is really respecting our riders' time. And I think a lot of mid-sized transit authorities like us over the years, routes tend to zig and zag, and there may be a legitimate reason to do it in like 1978, and then nobody relooked at it. Also, for less inspired local leaders than we have here in Amesbury, there are politicians who say, I care about having the coverage on a map, so it looks like I'm serving an area. Like we had a route in Haverhill that the inbound was so far away from the outbound, you couldn't get back to where you started.
Oh my gosh.
So on a map, it looks great. Looks like, I'm serving both these corridors. But reality, from a real rider, how am I going to use that? And we had a route that was literally a figure 8 in Lawrence. And so now the downside is when you straighten these routes out, it's a trade-off. There's always going to be someone who's going to be inconvenienced, and that you tend to hear about that more. So the call that any mayor or town administrator is going to get is more going to be from the person complaining than the person who says, "Wow, this is a great thing. I really appreciate the improvement. I appreciate the increased frequency." So it's you have to have a little bit of a thick skin, but you also have to listen, and that's the trade-off of I guess any leadership capacity.
Like, I know you guys are not MBTA, but do you guys have communications with them about like the morale that they deal with versus what the morale you guys deal with? Because I'm assuming that you guys probably have more pleasant riders, maybe. Maybe that's maybe that's an assumption, but
I think probably riders are riders, right?
Yeah.
And it may depend on the communities, and I think it is in one sense different animal, but there are like lessons you can learn, and I certainly don't want to be teaching the T a lesson, but we've had drivers who came from the T and they said one of the things that really attracted them working for us is that by being fare free, suddenly they have a better relationship with their passengers because
like
they're no
that.
longer policing the fare policy.
Yeah.
100%. That makes
I mean,
sense.
one of the stats that just I love is that our ridership has gone ballooned, gone off the charts, and yet our complaints have cut in half. So that's a better environment for the drivers. I think one thing we try to, and you can't really teach this, but you kind of have to maybe help inspire it, is that think of the agency as a we. I had an experience long time ago on the T, but it was and I was in Park Street on the Red Line, and suddenly the doors open, and train's just sitting there, and I was one of the passengers. We're going out looking on the platform, no announcement, nothing. And then you see the operator. She's walking the length of the platform. She's shaking her head, and one of the riders goes up and says, "So are we taking this train out of service?" She says, "They don't know. They don't know what they're doing."
Oh.
And I'm saying, wow, right?
Yeah.
It's got to be a
Yeah.
we.
Yeah.
And so,
being one team.
and so our folks, I like to say we bleed MeVa, coral, aqua, and gold. And you can't. It's unreasonable to ask that, and yet somehow that's how our folks are. We're passionate about what we do.
Yeah.
I have a question, just follow up about your relationship with MBTA and the train, because Claudel hasn't been on a bus, and I don't. I'm only a mile from my house to work, so I don't really need to ride the bus. I mean, I could walk, but even to walk to a bus to take I have a stop right in front of my office, but it's not really efficient for me to get on the bus to take it that one stop necessarily. So the people who may take the bus or be more likely to take the bus who, as a commuting mechanism, I would think from Amesbury would be going to the train station. So what is your relationship like for synchronization with the MBTA schedule to get people from Amesbury to that train station in Newburyport?
Yeah, I mean, it's a work in progress. I think that the T has, to their credit, at least recognized maybe it's a good idea to coordinate with the RTAs.
Okay.
I think obviously there are challenges with train schedules. Right now it would be easier if, and I think their goal is to get to a place like this where they had a clock face schedule so that, is throughout the day. The train left Newburyport at, 17 after the hour.
Okay.
And then we could build around that.
Yeah, because theirs is a little different
yes.
Yeah, I think about
on
that.
On the Lowell line now, they've gotten there, and it's, but that's their goal, to get there. And, we've shared with them, coordinate with us. So they do, they now give us their schedule updates. I mean, not in time for us to do anything about it, but at least it's like a minute and a half before the general public sees it now. And, in Lawrence now that we've relocated our bus hub to where the train station is. And I don't want to say it's the train station because it's actually, we own it. So it should be thought of as the bus station.
There you go.
But now every route in Lawrence goes to the train station. And so you're going to have a connection.
Yeah.
I think, in Haverhill, not eventually, as soon as we possibly can, should relocate that hub. And, so opportunities there to have more coordination with the train.
Yeah, that's great. I still have a ton of questions.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to go bounce back to ridership. And I guess these aren't questions, but well, sure. I'll start with a question. In some communities, you mentioned school students. So talk to me about students relying on buses and what that's like in different communities. In Amesbury, I would say they don't ride the bus. And that's one of my goals, is to get more young people riding the bus. But what does it look like in other communities?
Right. And I have to preface this because I think you're probably the only mayor or town administrator who appreciates this, that we can never be a replacement for yellow buses because there's the charter regulation says that we can't do that.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
So where we serve, but we do, I mean, it's in my opinion, I want to get as many school kids on the bus as possible because that's the next generation of riders. So
Right.
I want to build that now, so we don't get another Claudel who says, I'm a grown adult and I don't ride the bus. So, but that's, we have that in Lawrence. I mean, they do have a yellow bus system, but it's,
Okay.
it's not as reliable as our bus, particularly since we have two routes that go right by the high school. We don't pull into the high school, which we can't go into the school grounds, but we get close enough. Two routes that go by there each every half hour. So that's pretty reliable service. And so you're not dependent on catching the one school bus. If you're doing after school programs or stuff like that, you can get back. So that really makes a big difference. In Haverhill, we just met with a student and, they were pretty said, you know what, your bus goes right by Haverhill High 5 minutes after the bell rings for the end of the day. And we're all running for the bus. Can you hold the bus for 5 minutes? And so we looked, we can do that.
That's awesome.
And it's, and some of it is just, it's and kids may think, it's the evil bus company. They're deliberately doing this. And that's just, we need to be educated as much as anyone else. And that's, part of what, but it's also on us to be visible in the community, being, a resource that folks know they can come to and talk to. I answer sometimes to a fault pretty much every call or email I get from riders. And I think that's a lot of riders just don't expect that they're going to be listened to. And so when, suddenly they may be, guns a-blazing, but then if you just listen, it says, okay, all right, I understand. And so that's
great. I mean, that's the beauty of you being regional and, sort of approachable. And I love that students use the bus in so many communities. And I think for particularly, as you said, after school and late bus sort of needs, to just know that, the yellow bus maybe is gone. Maybe you missed the yellow bus, but there's another bus coming. And it, in our community, you could get pretty far. You might have to walk that last bit. And we have an area of the community where we've talked about we need to get a little closer to. But for a lot of kids, they could at least get halfway, and maybe that's a closer spot for a pickup, or it's closer to a friend or a family member, another place to hang out for a little bit until someone else is there. But they can at least get probably halfway there. And to know that bus is coming and it's a safe, reliable way to move about the community. Again, the intimidation factor for an adult, never mind a child or a young person, to get on the bus is there. So we want to work on that and get more young people taking the bus, as an option for transportation. So that's one of my big goals. So, and the other thing that I have that's on my mind is and I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but in a community where the bus is, more regular and more prevalent and again, part of your center of gravity, and this will resonate with you, Claudel. I think that realtors in particular probably talk more about the bus and that their listing is on a bus route. But in Amesbury or an area like this, that's really not something that comes up. And I've seen over the time that I was in real estate, even descriptions of real estate changing from an Amesbury listing being close to downtown Newburyport to being walkable to beautiful, vibrant downtown Amesbury. And I think the sort of connection and the inclusion and sort of starting to comment and talk about how accessible this is by bus. And I think there's a generation of folks who want to rely less on a personal vehicle. They want to be able to walk. They want to be able to hop on a bus. That if we can talk more to realtors about the routes and get them to understand and to get them on the buses, that's another population I want to sort of hook in and get to understand our RTA and what's going on in the region for buses.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, no, and that makes a lot of sense and sort of ties in with some of the some of the work we're doing. I think, by the way, MeVa is the only regional transit authority with a development department. It's one person. It's Christina. So if you're going to have one person be your development department, that's the way to do it. But,
yes, definitely.
But I think the reason is that, back in the not too distant past, funding was never easy, but it didn't require the same level of work it requires now, because you got your federal dollars, your state dollars, your local assessments, your fair revenue, and that's what you got year in, year out. If you want to be kind of proactive and you want to really meet the needs of your community, you're gonna have to shake down other funding sources. So I think we are trying to put together what we call a PLOF program, which is payment in lieu of fares.
Okay.
But that's, something we work with the business community. So whether that's, realtors, that may be someone who has a business who's, may not know that this is something they can tout to their customers, to their employees. That's a real benefit. And likewise, multiple social service providers who don't know that they can be promoting the transit options to their clientele. We got a grant from the state to do kind of a train the trainer sort of program because we're as we said at the beginning, we're a pretty small staff. We can't talk to every person in the Merrimack Valley. We'd love to, but we can't do that. But if we can talk to the people who talk to the people, then we have a further reach. But I love the idea of getting realtors, recognizing it's in their best interest to tout being on a MeVa bus line, and then maybe sort of disabusing them of some of the negative stereotypes of public transportation that we have worked so hard to change.
Yeah.
And we still have ways to go, but I think we've, people think now differently about public transportation when they see a bright MeVa bus than they used to when they saw a bus that looked exactly like a mail truck.
Yeah.
My next listing, I'm going to be
You're gonna put it in there?
with MeVa.
Okay.
Right.
I love it.
I'm going to do some marketing with MeVa.
That's great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, definitely. And tell the, the prospective buyers that, you've ridden the bus and that it's the best way to get
I'm
around.
Going to need to.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've done a lot of work, like you said, to sort of change that perspective. Is there a policy that you've worked on recently, and you may know what I'm thinking of, but that you want to talk about or share? Again, you do so much so fast. We've talked about how quickly MeVa is responding to our community. So, is there something recently that people should know about that you want to make sure they know?
The stroller policy. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. So this was.
Let's go.
This is almost breaking news because this rolled out just last month. But in the past. And I think we're a lot of transit authorities that have this policy that you have to, if you're a parent with a small child and they're in a stroller, you had to fold the stroller up to get on the bus and put it under the seat, and which looks great on paper until you've had a toddler.
It's inconvenient.
It's more right. It's right. And if you have multiple toddlers or babies, it's near impossible, and it's also unwelcoming. And so we worked. Now, I think what. And we had this discussion at the board meeting that as common sense and this is basic human decency to have this policy, you still can't just, as much as I'd like to, and I get accused of this sometimes, just snapping your fingers and saying this is what we're doing, but you have to make sure you get it right. So it was great work by folks on our team. So Betsaida Jarvis, who happens to be, not only is she the office coordinator, but she's also she's a bus rider. We love it when our employees are also bus riders, and also the mom of a small child. So she was in another community outside of here where they did have a more sort of open stroller policy, which I hate other transit authorities getting the jump on us. But she said, why doesn't MeVa do that? And I said, that's a good question. And so we brought in our safety trainer, Kassandra Fernandez, who's amazing because she can think about everything that can go wrong, right? Which is great when you're doing your safety policy up until the point where you say, I can't do something because here's the thing that will happen once in a blue moon. But they worked together. They developed a policy. We, pun intended, rolled it out in April, and it's gone very well. And it also sends the right message. It sends the message that we want you on our bus. Yeah. We want you to ride, and you're going to have a positive experience, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure you do.
What is the policy?
The policy is you can just roll your stroller onto the bus, and I may have left that out.
Maybe I missed.
No, I may have left it out in my excitement about that and explaining, giving the context, which is what the history. So yes, you can roll. You can just bring your stroller, and then it goes in a designated area. Yeah. There's if you have two people with wheelchairs on, then then they take precedent, and that's all spelled out. So
so it's really easy to get a stroller onto the bus.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Because the buses sort of come down to meet you, right?
Okay. Buses are low floor. All of our buses are low floor. So this is this is I love this as an example because back when the ADA was first made into law, the disability community asked for low floor buses. And the industry came back and said, no, I'm sorry, it's a engineering impossibility. And, you know, then 20 years later, turns out it wasn't. And so, you know, we've been running low floor buses since 2004. And most transit authorities now, that's the standard. One of the things we've done recently was the what's called cutaways, basically the vans that our mini MeVas use. That's been slower. The market has been slower to develop the low floor, which is insane because you think of the people who are riding those vehicles need low floor more than anyone.
Yeah.
So, you know, you either have to walk up a few steps, you know, with, you know, your cane and your walker, or you have to ride this very slow moving lift with everyone staring at you. So, you know, this was an area where I did snap my fingers and say, we're changing the policy. We're not going to buy another high floor van.
Yeah.
My maintenance manager almost strangled me. But he's mostly come around, and we got our first shipment just recently, including and actually went because of our partnership with our cities and towns. It was a grant from the state that invited both RTAs, and through RTAs, some of the councils on aging at our member communities could also get a vehicle. So Amesbury stepped up too, and so yesterday the mayor got to see the brand new low floor cutaway, which is again that's what we want to do. We want to be, as you said, you know, easy, convenient. We don't no excuses.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Yeah, they're really easy. I mean, the low floor is great. And then there's also a ramp that just sort of like unfolds very quickly. You know, it's very simple. It's not, you don't have to like come in and go up the the sort of couple steps that you're probably expecting, that right? The old buses.
I want to leave my car parked and
it's really great.
Yeah.
It's really great. Yeah.
That is awesome.
So we've covered a lot of what you have done. We've talked about the communities, some communities in particular that you've adjusted to. And I think, Claudel, you had some great questions in mind about sort of bigger picture, what MeVa is doing
I would
for folks.
love to know about the future of MeVa as far as maybe future projects or innovation, or what do you guys have going on? One of the things I really want to talk about is the water ferry.
Oh, yes. Oh. Yes. No, that's we're very excited about that. It's we're the Merrimack Valley.
Yeah.
And this whole region when it was built, the central artery was the river, and every ferry street in the Merrimack Valley used to go to a ferry dock.
Oh,
right, because that's why would they be named
ferry street?
Just like, the railroad avenues always ended at a train station. But of course we have short attention spans, so we've forgotten that, but that really is the whole the way these communities are shaped. It's all around the river, and it's a resource. So there's been in recent years there's been an effort to get folks who live by the river may not have been able to take advantage of it onto the river, and that's whether kayaking or fishing or any other things to really use the river as a resource. And I think we also look, always looking at our route structure, how to stitch our communities together. We were working with actually Senator Markey's office. We got a grant to build two electric ferry boats. So we're going to put the RFP for that, but there's a lot of interest. But the idea is it would serve the three communities of Haverhill, Amesbury, and Newburyport. And so the line haul in the morning, go from Haverhill to Amesbury to Newburyport, and then in the late-ish afternoon, come back. But throughout the day, go back and forth between Amesbury and Newburyport. And, I think this is, again, an exciting way to, if we work together with all of our modes. So, again, we have a mock-up of the ferry boat with our bright MeVa colors.
Yeah.
And that's a way of, again, introducing, it's another way to get between our communities. I mean, there are a lot of people who live in one end of our district and work in another. And another option, but it's also someone who may have never thought of riding a bus. But I said, wow, I rode this great MeVa ferry. And by the way, there's a bus at where the ferry docks. looks the same.
Yeah.
Why don't I get on that?
Yeah.
So again, that changes like what people think of as their relationship to public transportation and what public transportation means to them.
Right. So can I get from Haverhill to Amesbury and then on a bus to go to the beach?
Yes.
That
Yes, you
sounds
can.
awesome.
Yes, you can.
So I could avoid some traffic.
You can avoid a lot of
Yeah.
traffic.
Yeah.
And
Get on the water.
Yes.
That's it. I'm returning
Yeah.
my car.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's
Returning the
awesome.
car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is great. Wow.
Yeah. That's something we're really excited about.
And I think, and we love that we're working with the city who, they've also been, what I love about Amesbury is you guys are good at, I think we're kindred spirits in that way, kind of shake down every opportunity for funding and every opportunity to do something new.
Yeah.
And so, you guys got the grant for the municipal dock.
Yeah.
Timing is
Yeah.
perfect. And
Yeah.
and actually it was funny that MVPC, the planning commission, they're doing work for us on a business plan. They're doing work for you. And, because they're doing it together, they actually talk to each other, which is like, that's
Isn't
why we
that
have,
crazy,
that's
huh?
why we have regional planning commissions.
Yeah.
So they can, so you're not all siloed in, famous New England parochial fashion where, each community is completely isolated.
Yeah.
So I think that we're really excited about that. I think a lot of people, now the problem is if we project that excitement too much, people start lining up at the docks and we say, all right, slow down. It's going to happen. But there's still some work that needs to get knocked down before then.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, so we have almost $900,000 to renovate our public boat ramp, which is where the ferry will come in. It's for the ramp, some docks, which we don't have there now, the parking lot, and some boardwalk area and beautification. So we're really excited about that. We'll have that done, I think, a little bit prior to the ferry arriving. But we, like you said, the sort of choreography and coordination of that has been great because we wanted to make sure that the docks that we have available were what we need for a ferry, which may be a little different than what we would have otherwise had. So that's really great, and we're working on that. So that's a whole new world for MeVa.
Yeah. It's gonna be wow. Yeah, it just shows the growth of where we're going, MeVa, the city, or just the region in general.
Yeah, it's great.
Exciting. Definitely exciting.
I have one last question
ahead.
that might wrap us up. Do you have more otherwise?
I have one last question as well.
Okay.
Do you want me to ask?
Yeah,
first?
go ahead.
Okay, cool. My question was, what has been your proudest moment at MeVa?
I mean, it's like proudest moment. I think it's hard to single out one moment. I mean, I think the overall, in terms of the growth, I'll give two answers. One is sort of the overall, and the other very specific, heartfelt thing that's actually local to Amesbury. But I think what I'm proudest of overall is when I first started here, and I was like, anytime you start out, you want to set the world on fire. You go and and I sort of grabbed our then marketing director. She's now our deputy administrator, and so she, Kassandra knows Neo. She's fabulous, and she makes my life so much easier, even though I make her life so much harder. But
Neo's great. Yes.
Yeah, she is, and she. So we went to a bunch of community groups, and we went to traveled around the Merrimack Valley, and I thought I'd ask people, what do we do well, and what do we do not so well? And I thought I was prepared for both answers, and what I was not prepared for was the third answer is, we have no friggin' idea. You guys are irrelevant to us. And that was just this big light bulb moment that, wow, we have to work hard to be visible in our communities. It's, we can't just sit back and expect people to come to us. And so that's why we rebranded, among other things. It's way more than just prettying up the buses. It's just changing the attitudes and actually literally opening the doors to the community to get on the bus. And that was, and so most of what we've done, all the things we've talked about, stem from that. And that was, that's something that I think really sets the stage for not only where we are now, but where we're headed. I think it just a moment that I was very proud of, and I think the mayor knows well about this, is that about a year ago, there was a really bad crash right here in Amesbury on 110. It's a drunk driver driving wrong way on 110, hit our bus head on. Right, the car burst into flames. The driver was airlifted out, not in good shape. The driver, like, immediately his training kicked in. He maneuvered the bus to safety. Every single one of those passengers, there were 12 passengers on board, every single one walked off the bus unassisted. The driver was the last one off, like the good captain on a ship. And afterwards, he said, thank you, MeVa, for the amazing training that you gave me, that I knew what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also, a statement that I mean, I hate that it was our bus. I really hate that it was our bus, because it messed up that bus good, and it was a pretty bus. But imagine if it was a car that any one of us were driving, right? We would not, and it just reinforces that public transportation is safe.
Yeah.
And our drivers are professionals. They're well trained. You are in good hands when you're on our bus. So that's just a personal pride. We actually brought him into a board meeting and made sure that the board recognized him. And it's just, I mean, that's one thing that's a horrific situation that was handled well. But these are the men and women who drive our vehicles and maintain our vehicles, who service our grounds. They're all top notch, and they care about what they do. They care about the people they serve, and it shows through.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is a proud moment.
Yeah. I remember that. And I knew right away. I had communication from first responders, but I also had communication from Noah that this had happened in Amesbury and that everyone was safe. And it was really important, sort of demonstration of our partnership and the commitment to our passengers, who are, probably many of them from Amesbury or neighboring communities, right? And taking care of the people who live here. Yeah. It was a great day for MeVa to demonstrate its commitments. So I feel like we should have ended with that, but but we won't. I'll have one last question for you. But we've talked we've covered a lot of ground here, but just emphasizing to the community how important the work is that you do. How do you afford to do that? Where does your funding come from? Since you are fare free, what does that look like? So, we talk a lot about funding and budgets and things here. So for the taxpayers and people to know, where does that money come from and what does that look like?
Yeah, no, and that's, I think, it's been a long time since public transportation was ever made money.
Yeah.
And I think what people don't realize, and that's everywhere in the world. It's not just here. So back when we did collect fares covered 9% of our operating budget. And that's before you subtract out the cost of collecting fares. So yes, we're leaving money on the table by not collecting fares, but hopefully we have to hustle, but we have to find other sources. We do get funding from the federal government. We get funding. Biggest chunk of funding comes from the state, and then from the local assessments to our member communities. That's why we are, RTAs in general have been level funded for up until about 2 years ago for 6 years. And, as we know, level funding means a cut, particularly in high inflationary times.
Yeah.
And I think there had been that mindset that just be grateful for what you get. And I think, a lot of the first generation of transit administrators were under that, and because they had to be, that was their mindset. And so it was very cautious. You hoarded whatever dollar you could get. I'm far enough along in my career that I'm willing to be escorted out of the facility. So I'm willing to take chances. I'm not as risk averse. I shouldn't say that because my boss is sitting here, but I think sometimes you have to take those risks.
Yeah.
And so we were, when the first round of the fair share amendment funds, which are targeted towards education and transportation, were available 2 years ago. We made sure that we were ready to use those funds pretty much just after the ink was dry on the governor's signature. And so we rolled out, that's when we first rolled out our later evening service just a month after, which allowed us to run till 10 o'clock at night on some routes. And then Sunday service in starting the January after that.
Yeah.
As well as other little initiatives like our, with the, we had a van service that went out to the Bedford VA for veterans and their families, and that's open to everyone in the Merrimack Valley. Even though Bedford's not in our service district, by the way. And things like that. And we're still working with. We have an initiative. We got another grant from MassDOT to run our 2 highest ridership routes. The one in the 24, which will together connect Lowell, Lawrence, Methuen, and Haverhill. And they'll run every 20 minutes. So that, it gets to a point where you don't even have to know the schedule.
Yeah.
You just walk down. When we have a bus stop,
You just know
you
a
go to the
bus
bus
is
and
coming.
bus is coming. And in the worst situation, you have to wait 19 minutes. But, that's, most of the time it'll be 5-10 minutes. So, I mean, that's, and the goal frequency makes all the difference. So I think, right here in Amesbury, the routes run every hour. So if you miss the bus, that's a big hit.
Yeah.
So, to the extent that we can do it where we have the personnel, we have the vehicles, we have the capacity, we want to increase frequency because that's the real driver for where people are willing to take the next step to get on public transit that might have other options. So that's important. I think another step that we're going to introduce is more crosstown service. So, particularly in Lawrence and Haverhill, where everything comes to the hub, that's great if that's where you're going. But if you want, and we've, Methuen in particular, where you can't get to anywhere in Methuen without going to Lawrence first. And for some reason, people in Methuen don't want that. So we're looking at, and we have to do it right. But put the crosstown service, and then, that may require folks to make bus connections, which is, again, something that they're not used to outside of the hubs. But we're looking forward to introducing that, so rolling out, gradually over the next couple of years.
Yeah. That's great. So I just want to emphasize that there is a local assessment, which means it appears on Amesbury's cherry sheet. It is something that our taxpayers contribute to. And so this is a service that you pay for. And so there's a local assessment to every community that is in your district. If a community who wanted to be part of it, so not everyone has an RTA, not everyone's serviced by an RTA. If they wanted to be, they'd have to sort of petition to become part of one, and they would then get their assessment if that all played out the way that they wanted it to. So a service that is part of your tax bill, and hopefully you've learned more about it today. We've again covered a lot of ground and learned a lot more. I know I have.
I definitely have. You're paying for it. You better ride it.
Yeah. You're so although fare free, it is sort of it's part of our public funding, which just makes it convenient to get on and off on a daily basis. It's just a service that you can rely on, that is safe and dependable. So that's really fantastic, and we're really fortunate to have MeVa in our region, and servicing Amesbury. Like you said, you've really blazed a trail for so many others and been on the forefront of so much. So. So thank you for being here. Thanks to you and your team for what you do.
Thank you very much, Noah. It's been great. I learned a lot.
Thanks for having me. It's been a blast.
Awesome.
Definitely.
Thanks everybody for joining us again for Talk Over Tea. We'll be back next time.